want to suggest to you that the hardest thing that any journalist might attempt is to write a book. We're all used to short form, short burst reporting, and the task of turning out pages is daunting. So how do they do it? What's the process? Is it all worth it at the end? We have a special extended edition of the program today as three leading South African journalists sit down with me and talk about the tough job of writing. This is Mags on Media. A very warm welcome. Now, someone who doesn't seem to be struggling with that transition is Mandy Wiener. She's a multi-award-winning investigative journalist and reporter with bestsellers like Killing Kebble and Behind the Door, the Oscar Pistorius and Reeva Steenkamp story under her belt. Mandy joins us with her latest offering. It's a tome, Ministry of Crime, an underworld explored. It's just been released. Next to her is journalist Lukhanyo Khalata, whose father, Fort Khalata, was murdered by agents of the apartheid state in 1985 in the infamous Cradock story. His book is entitled My Father Died for This, which he wrote in collaboration with his wife Abigail, and traces the life of a father, he'll tell us, that he hardly knew, and also the mystery, I think, that still surrounds the killings. Joining us from Cape Town, well-known political writer Yan Yan Joubert, who has recently released his book, Who Will Rule in 2019. To all of you, a very warm welcome. I am looking forward to the conversation. Lukhanyo, let me start with you. The inspiration to sit down and actually write a book. What was the spark in your particular instance? I'm assuming that there was much to uncover, but it's a very personal and heartfelt story.
Jeremy, well, for me, it started off when I was a little boy. I think the reason why I'm a journalist today is because I used to watch journalists, people like yourself.
Gee, thanks for that.
who used to come to Cradock and who used to report on my father's story and the story of the Cradock 4. And I think when I was about 12 or 13, I think I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So ever since then, I had set out my goal to become a journalist. So when we were offered the opportunity to write a book, I think it was so many years in the making that I could, literally just sit down and start writing. And I had the good fortune, I think, to have the issue with the SABC a couple of years ago. And that was a way in for us into the book because it was a nice way for us to establish myself and then start telling my father's story. So for me, it's been years in the making.
And we're going to get to the research side of it, which must have been very, very difficult. Yan Yan, in Cape Town, maybe the process for you was a little bit easier because as we approach the 2019 general election, there are so many unanswered questions and you're almost entering the realm here of the unknown. People are desperately looking for a crystal ball.
Well, I don't know about a crystal ball, but, I love politics. And what I wanted to do was to tell people why I like it so much and why it is not an alienating or worrying experience for me to work with politics, is that you can enjoy politics. It is the story of our country. It is your opportunity to be part of the future of our country, and it is a joy to just take that curtain and move it away so that people can see what makes politics fun.
Do you think that all South Africans are as obsessed with politics as you are? I would suggest that many of us are.
Well, I don't know about obsessed, but I think interested. I think obsession is never a good thing. In my case, I just love how our politics mirror the beauty of our country. And it's a bit frustrating to me that so many people don't see it that way. So what I'm trying to do in the book, and that's what I tried to do in the research, is to make it more palatable, more interesting and more fun so that people can enjoy our politics. OK, Mandy Wiener, Yan Yan uses the word, it's not with the phrase, it's not necessarily a good thing to become too obsessed. But let's be quite honest here. This particular subject, you've become fairly obsessed with, haven't you?
Probably a little bit of an understatement. I think I've definitely earned a reputation of... John Robbie used to call me the Minister of Crime.
Yes.
And I suppose that's where the title for the book came from. I'm just interested in it. I'm interested in the characters. I'm interested in the criminal justice system and how it operates, not only on that level of the interaction between the kind of mafia and the police, but also how it affects the man in the street and how regular people are recipients of justice in this country.
But mostly it's about the characters, because you can't make people like this up.
No, you can't. And I suppose that's what makes it so readable, is that that these are charismatic people. They are compelling characters. But you also don't corrupt the head of crime intelligence or the head of detectives or the National Police Commissioner in the country if you are not a compelling, charismatic character. It does take someone like that to ingratiate themselves and to have the chutzpah to go and corrupt somebody who's at that level.
So we've now got what the spark was from the three of you. So Lukhanya, back to you then. How do you start planning and constructing the narrative?
Ooh, Jeremy.
You just sat down and it all came to you.
No,
it didn't.
no, it didn't. I think one of the first things that I had to do was to stop thinking as a broadcaster, first and foremost, but start thinking as a print journalist.
Because of the point I made in the introduction, we think in short bits, don't we? Yeah. So how did you extend that then?
Well, fortunately, I have a wife who had worked in the print media for quite a long time. I'd had ideas of the chapters in my head. So we actually sat down and then we said, okay, how are we practically going to do this? Okay, so chapter 1, this is what we're doing. Chapter 2, this is what we're doing. Chapter 3, chapter 4, and then eventually we had the outline of a book just in chapter forms, which is all it fits on one page. And then from there, it's like, okay, now taking that one page and then turning it into a book. And that was a very interesting process. But okay, so once we had those chapters, then it was time to, okay, now we must sit down and write. Unfortunately, that's what it means. You know, you have to sit down behind this little computer and spend hours and hours.
And that blinking cursor.
Yeah.
I mean, literally blinking and blinking, if you know what I mean.
You know? And there was a time when you kept on looking at the number of words. You know, it's like, oh, only 20 words, and you think, oh.
Yeah, and then you've got to get up and make coffee or play with a dog or do something like that. Yan Jubber in Cape Town, what specific journalism skills then would you have brought to the writing of the book, or is it something completely different?
Well, I think the big thing in our politics is that the analysis is sometimes so poor. You sometimes get the feeling that analysts just say what they think. They don't really go into the data. And my joy is to go into the data and actually prove what the data says and to speak to the people at the coalface. So what I did was interview the leaders of the top 8 opposition parties and governing party in our country, and to get from them what decisions they want to be taken in 2019, what their options are and what their preferences are, also about each other.
Is the interview process for a book any different to a story that you might be constructing for a newspaper?
Absolutely, and you put your finger on it. You have more time, you have more space, so you can go more in depth. The people can actually tell you exactly what they think, and you have space to not have to cut words, as we have to do in newspapers all the time and in print journalism.
Mandy, very quickly, what was your daily process in putting this out, given that you had so many strands that you kept having to pull together because you're wanting to reach some sort of end conclusion?
So what I try and do is weave together as many narratives as possible in this tapestry, but that also means keeping track of what's going on. So you have to be quite careful about when you weave which narrative in. So I do plot beforehand what it's going to look like holistically, although a lot of that does actually live in my head. So I know kind of what I want the end product to look like. And invariably it kind of mutates depending on the interview that you do, it just grows and expands. But you know, as Yan says, it's very different, that interview process to when you are interviewing for dailies. You know, if I'm doing a radio interview, I'm looking for the soundbite. And I know what that soundbite sounds like, and I can get it in a minute and a half. Whereas for a book, you can do an interview that takes hours and hours.
We'll have more with journalists turned authors Mandy Wiener, Yan Jubber and Lukhanya Kalata when Mags on Media continues.